So I just finished watching part 1 of Time for School, and something that I want to talk about that I heard at the end of the video first was that 75 million of the world's children are still waiting for their education. And that's 75 million children out of 7 billion people. And if you think about that, that is such a big number, 75 million. To think that those children don't have an education and then they don't have the opportunity to go to school when I just have been going to school since I was 5 years old. No question, just I go to school. That's what I do. It's hard to think that those students don't have that opportunity to have their education. Something that I liked at the beginning of the video was that it said education is key and nothing comes without learning. That's so true, because you can't learn anything if you're not going to school, you're not, pushing yourself to get that education. I want to take the 4 countries that were shown and break them up and just kind of relate them to each other and talk about them individually in a way. And those 4 countries were Afghanistan, Brazil, India, and Japan. And just going to Afghanistan first, I like the little statistics that they showed at the beginning of each of the videos. And it said that 1/3 of the country is not in school. And most of those 1/3 are the girls. And it said that it was one of the most dangerous places for girls to go to school because of all the violent attacks that keep shutting their schools down. And the condition of the country is just not great because they're in war and they're just not good for their education at all. One thing that I thought was really great was that her dad really supported education. He really wanted her to have that education because it's just important for her to have that kind of knowledge and background. He said that education is obligation for all, male or female. And another statistic that they said was 3/4 of the girls in Afghanistan will drop out by her age. And right now she is 11 years old. It's really hard for her to keep up with her education because she's in a family of 13. And that's really hard to be in a family that big because she has a lot of responsibilities. She has to keep the family kind of, on their feet because there's so many of them. So it's kind of hard for her to keep up with all her schoolwork. Especially because the men of the house don't do schoolwork. It's just not what they do. They get to play, they get to relax, and the women do all the chores, which leaves her for not being able to have enough time for studies, which kind of makes her fall behind in a way. The children in Afghanistan are pretty scared because of all the war attacks, and it's a pretty big disruption of their learning environment, especially when a lot of the girls are hospitalized due to violent attacks, like poison gas attacks. And I just thought that was, kind of crazy that people would do that to children going to school, trying to get an education. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around it. It's hard for me to understand how someone could do that to girls. Now kind of transitioning into Brazil. One thing I thought that was really interesting and kind of respectable to Brazil was that Brazil pays for poor families to keep their educations in schools, and the enrollment rates went up while the dropout rates went down, which is quite a bit of progress considering where they were at before. And another thing was kind of interesting was the boy that they were following, Jefferson. His mom was unemployed, raising 4 children alone. So school was, kind of important for them to help out his mom, kind of keep things going in the family. I thought it was pretty interesting, how important school is for children in Brazil, because his mom was talking about how if he didn't go to school, he'd become a drug addict or, a drug dealer, and how his sister or the daughter would become a hooker, I guess. So, if going to school keeps them proper, keeps them, it keeps them happy and away from those bad things that are typical for Brazil children. Also, another thing is to keep him out of trouble. He goes to an after-school program for religion, and so that keeps him, happy. It keeps him obedient to his mother, and so he doesn't have to worry about falling into that trend of becoming a drug addict like a lot of his friends or the other crowd does. His mom kind of tries to keep him away from that. Now going over to India, there's 25 million children that are not in school, and that is a lot of people. The girl, she really, really wants to be in school. She wants to be a teacher, but school is not supported for girls very much in India. Her parents are like, oh, she shouldn't be in school. She should just become a cattle herder like I am. And so that's what she does during the day. She does the chores during the day, and then at night she goes to school. But unfortunately, throughout the years, the enrollment rate went down in the night school and they shut it down. So she had a harder time getting that education because the parents kept transferring their children into day school. And for a period of time in 2006, she wasn't even able to go to school because she was helping her father out with the cattle, so she was 4 months behind. And so a lot of the time, all her older friends were many grades ahead of her, and she was still, the big girl with a whole bunch of little kids, which she kind of got made fun of that. So she dropped out of embarrassment. So pretty much right now her future is up to her family and what they'll allow her to do. Now going over to Ken in Japan, something that was really cool is the enrollment rate in Japan is 100%, just like the United States. And something that was really respectable about him is that he cares about the other countries. He kind of is aware what's going on with the other countries. He kind of knows that these kids, there's other kids in other countries who don't have the opportunity to have education. And I don't think at my age I quite understood that. I guess I was a little naive at his age, but he's a really smart kid. He knows exactly what's going on, which I think is part of his culture too, because I think education is a little bit more stressed and a little more pushed than it is in America. Especially since he hasn't missed a day since kindergarten, which is pretty respectable, and he likes going to school. And I remember I would try to find any excuse to miss school when I was little. For him, school is the world. That is something that they said in the video. School is the world. School is really important. I just, kind of looking at these 4 countries, it gives me a better perspective and a better understanding of how these students need education and how it's important for people in school, for people in other countries to have an education, and how I just take what I have for granted. I think that it's important for us to be aware of what's going on in these other countries, to know that to not just be so selfish of what we have, and to know that there's other students who need education. I think that it's important to make other people aware as well, and maybe by making other people aware, something can happen. I don't know how well each country will develop, by that 2015 goal to have their country's education needs met, but I believe that people are slowly progressing. People are starting kind of looking at these countries, especially the countries where it's not common for girls to go to school. People are starting to understand that girls need education too. It's not just up to the men, because sometimes, women need to provide for themselves too. And I just think it's really important for education. It's just absolutely important. I never really understood how important education was until I came to college. And all throughout high school, I guess I just took it for granted. I was just like, oh, I'll get a degree in something and I'll figure something out. But I can't just take education for granted and take it so lightly, because there's other students in other countries who don't have that education, and it makes me want to try harder in school. It makes me want to get the best grades that I can to show not only myself but others that I can do anything that I set my mind to, and so can these students in these other countries. They can do whatever they want as long as they work hard for it. And yeah, so that's important, and that's my video.